Have you ever wondered what would happen if you stood up to a person who could ruin your life with a single phone call? Not for a reward, not for glory, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Our story tonight is about Evelyn, a waitress drowning in debt who risks everything she has, which isn't much, to defend a voiceless old man. She expected to be fired, to be blacklisted, to fall even deeper into despair. She never expected the man she defied, a ruthless billionaire named Adrian Finch, to reappear hours later with an object of impossible power, a limitless black card. But this card wasn't a gift. It was a test, a key, and a curse that would unlock a world of secrets, betrayal, and a past far more broken than her own. Stay with us as we unravel how one act of courage in a high-end restaurant kitchen triggered a chain of events that no one could have ever predicted. The air in the kitchen of Aurelia, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, was a frantic symphony of chaos. The hiss of the grill, the percussive chop of knives, the sharp staccato shouts of Chef Dubois. It was a pressure cooker, and Evelyn Vance felt its heat in her bones. For the past 10 hours, she had been a ghost, gliding between the opulent, velvet-draped dining room and this stainless steel inferno. Her smile, practiced and precise for the patrons, melted the second she pushed through the swinging doors. Here there was only exhaustion. Evelyn was 24, but some days she felt 40. Every dollar from this job, every cash tip she smoothed out at the end of the night, was a tiny drop in an ocean of debt. There was her art school tuition, a dream she was barely keeping afloat, and more urgently, the mounting medical bills for her younger sister Maya, whose lungs were as fragile as spun glass. So Evelyn smiled, she upsold the wine, she described the pan-seared scallops with a passion she didn't feel, and she endured. Tonight, Table 7 was the eye of the storm. It was occupied by one man, Adrian Finch. Even if you didn't know his name, you knew his type. His suit was a quiet masterpiece of tailoring, his watch was worth more than her car, and his presence sucked the warmth out of the room. He wasn't loud or flashy, he was worse. He possessed a terrifying stillness, an aura of absolute power that made waiters tremble and managers comp his appetizers without being asked. He had been dining alone, staring at his phone with a permanent scowl etched onto his handsome but severe features. The tension peaked when he ordered the pot creme, a dessert served on a specific hand-painted porcelain plate. Chef Dubois himself inspected it before it left the kitchen. "Vance, take this. Do not trip. Do not breathe on it. Do not exist near it. Just place it on the table." Evelyn's hands were steady as she delivered it. Mr. Finch didn't even look up from his phone, just grunted in acknowledgement. She retreated, her part in the delicate dance complete. 10 minutes later, the dish was cleared by a busboy, and then it happened. From the dishwashing station in the back corner, there was a sudden, sickening crash. Not the usual clatter of silverware, but the sharp, definitive sound of porcelain shattering on tile. A collective inhale sucked the air out of the kitchen. Every eye swiveled to the source. There stood Santiago, his face a mask of horror. He was a man in his late 60s, with kind, wrinkled eyes and hands gnarled from a lifetime of hard work. He'd come from Colombia 20 years ago and spoke only broken English, communicating mostly through nods and gentle smiles. In his hands was the remnants of the serving tray, and at his feet, the beautiful hand-painted plate from Table 7 lay in a dozen pieces. Before Chef Dubois could even unleash his volcanic fury, a figure darkened the kitchen doorway. It was Adrian Finch. He didn't yell, not at first. He walked slowly, deliberately towards the dish pit, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the greasy floor. He stopped in front of Santiago, who seemed to shrink to half his size. "That plate," Mr. Finch said, his voice dangerously low, each word a chip of ice. "Do you have any idea what that was?" Santiago stared, his lips trembling. "Sir, I am sorry. So sorry." "Slip? Sorry?" Finch's voice rose, cracking like a whip. "That plate was part of a set, a one-of-a-kind set commissioned for my wife, my late wife. You can't buy another one. You can't replace it. Do you understand the meaning of the word irreplaceable, you useless old man?" The kitchen staff froze. This was beyond a customer complaint. This was a public execution. Chef Dubois opened his mouth to intervene, but a single withering glare from Finch silenced him. "I will have your job," Finch seethed, pointing a finger at Santiago's chest. "And then I will find out where you live, and I will sue you for the value of that art. It's probably more money than your entire family will ever see. You will be destitute. You will be—" "Enough!" The word was quiet, but it sliced through the tirade like a surgeon's scalpel. Adrian Finch turned. Evelyn had stepped forward, positioning herself slightly in front of Santiago. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, so hard she thought it might break them. She could feel the stares of 20 of her colleagues boring into her back. This was career suicide. "What did you just say?" Finch asked, his eyes narrowing into venomous slits. "I said enough," Evelyn repeated, her voice clearer now, steadier. "It was an accident. He's an old man who has been on his feet for 12 hours. You've made your point." A humorless laugh escaped Finch's lips. "Have I? And who are you?" "The waitress. The girl who brings me my water. You think you have the right to tell me when my point is made?" "I have the right to tell a bully to back off when I see one," she shot back, the words leaving her lips before she could stop them. "You're humiliating a man for a mistake. It's a plate. Your wife is gone. Breaking this man's spirit won't bring her back. It just makes you a monster." The silence that followed was absolute, terrifying. Adrian Finch stared at her, his face a canvas of disbelief that slowly hardened into pure, unadulterated rage. He looked from her defiant eyes to the cowering old man behind her, and then back. He seemed to be seeing her for the first time, not as a server, but as an obstacle. He took a step closer, his voice dropping back to that lethal whisper. "You have no idea what you've just done." He turned on his heel and strode out of the kitchen. A moment later, the restaurant manager, Mr. Davies, scurried in, his face pale. He didn't even look at Santiago. His eyes were locked on Evelyn. "Vance, my office. Now." Evelyn knew it was over. As she walked past Santiago, he grabbed her arm, his eyes filled with tears. "No, no," he whispered. "You? For me? No." She gave him a weak, fleeting smile. "It's okay, Santiago." But it wasn't okay. It was the end of her job, the end of her tuition payments, and quite possibly the end of her hope. Mr. Davies' office was a cramped, windowless box that always smelled faintly of stale coffee and desperation. Tonight, the desperation was all his. He wrung his hands, avoiding Evelyn's gaze as he paced behind his cluttered desk. "Evelyn, what were you thinking?" he finally stammered, his voice cracking. "That was Adrian Finch, not just a Finch. The Finch. He owns the company that holds the mortgage on this building. He could shut us down with a text message." "He was terrorizing Santiago," Evelyn said, her own voice flat, the adrenaline of the confrontation draining away, leaving a cold, heavy dread in its place. "He called him useless. He threatened to ruin his life over a piece of ceramic." "It's not your job to be the social justice police," Davies snapped, his fear making him cruel. "Your job is to take orders and smile. That's it. You know our policy. The guest is always right. Even when they're a monster? Especially when they're a monster who can afford to be." He finally stopped pacing and slumped into his chair looking defeated. "He wants you gone, effective immediately, and he wants Santiago gone too." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Santiago? But it was my fault. I'm the one who spoke up." "Finch doesn't care. He wants a sacrifice, and today he gets two. I'm sorry, Evelyn. My hands are tied." He started shuffling papers, a clear dismissal. "Security will escort you out. Please clear out your locker." The walk to the staff lockers was a blur of averted eyes and sympathetic whispers from her coworkers. No one dared to speak to her directly. Fear was contagious. She changed out of her uniform into her worn jeans and t-shirt, the fabric feeling alien against her skin. She was no longer a waitress at Aurelia. She was just Evelyn again. Unemployed Evelyn. Santiago was waiting for her by the back exit, his own meager belongings in a plastic bag. His face was etched with a profound guilt. "Señorita," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Por mi culpa. My fault. I lose you your job." Evelyn managed a faint smile, placing a hand on his arm. No, Santiago, it was my choice. Don't you dare blame yourself. That man is the one to blame. She hesitated, then pulled the contents of her wallet out, a crumpled collection of tips from the night. About $70. She pushed it into his hand. Here, it's not much, but please take it. He tried to refuse, but she insisted, closing his gnarled fingers over the bills. For your family, go home. Tears welled in his eyes as he nodded, whispering, Dios te bendiga, señorita. God bless you. He shuffled off into the night, and Evelyn was left alone in the alley, the smells of garbage and gourmet cooking mingling in the damp air. The weight of her decision finally crushed her. She hadn't just lost a job. She had lost the fragile lifeline that kept her and Maya afloat. The bus ride home was a study in misery. Every streetlight that passed illuminated the stark reality of her situation. How would she pay rent next month? How would she afford the refill for Maya's expensive inhalers? Her dream of finishing her art degree now seemed like a foolish, childish fantasy. She had traded it all for a moment of principle. And for what? To make an old man's firing slightly less humiliating? Her apartment was a small, third-floor walk-up that always seemed to hold the chill of the night. She entered quietly, not wanting to wake Maya. A soft light was on in the living room, and she found her sister, a frail but determined 17-year-old, asleep on the couch, surrounded by textbooks. A medical bill was peeking out from under a history book on the coffee table. The stark red past due stamp seemed to mock her. Evelyn felt a wave of nausea. She had failed. She had let her temper, her sense of justice, jeopardize the one person she had sworn to protect. She picked up a blanket and gently draped it over Maya, her heart aching with a love so fierce it was painful. She stood there for a long time, just watching her sister breathe, each soft exhale a precious sound. Retreating to her own small room, she sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, the city's distant sirens providing a mournful soundtrack. She didn't cry. She was too empty for tears. There was only a cold, hollow certainty that she had made a terrible, irreversible mistake. Sleep was an impossible dream. The minutes bled into hours. It was just after 2 a.m. when she heard it, a soft, polite knock on the apartment door. Her blood ran cold. No one came to their apartment this late. Her mind raced through a Rolodex of fears. The landlord chasing late rent, a police officer with bad news. She crept to the door, her heart pounding, and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but she could see the top of a man's head directly below. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit. A chauffeur? Hesitantly, she opened the door a crack, the safety chain still engaged. The man was standing there, his posture ramrod straight, his expression impassive. He wasn't a threat, he was a messenger. "Miss Evelyn Vance?" he asked, his voice a polished, professional baritone. "Yes. A delivery for you, from Mr. Adrian Finch." Evelyn's first instinct was to slam the door. What was this? A lawsuit? A restraining order delivered in person to maximize her humiliation? The man simply held out a slim, elegant black envelope. It bore no name, no address, just the heavy, expensive feel of linen paper. Her name had been the only address he needed. The realization that Finch knew where she lived sent a fresh wave of fear through her. Her hands trembling, she unlatched the chain and took the envelope. It was surprisingly heavy. The man gave a slight, formal nod. "Good evening, miss." And with that, he turned and walked silently down the hall, disappearing down the stairs. Evelyn locked the door, her back pressed against it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She looked down at the black envelope in her hand. It felt cold, dangerous. Inside, she knew, was the next chapter of her nightmare. With a sense of grim finality, she broke the wax seal and pulled out the contents. It wasn't a letter. It was a small, hard black card, sleek and featureless except for a silver chip and a single name embossed in silver letters, E. Vance. Tucked behind it was a small, folded note, handwritten on the same heavy stock. The handwriting was sharp, aggressive, just like the man himself. "Miss Vance, courage is a commodity. So is stupidity. I have yet to determine which you possess. This is not an apology. I do not apologize. This is a proposition. The card has no preset limit. It is tied directly to my primary financial holdings. Use it. Use it for whatever you want. Buy a car. Buy a building. Pay for your sister's medical care. Yes, I looked into your circumstances. Consider it an experiment. I want to see what a person with a spine of steel and a wallet of nothing does when given the world. Don't try to find me. I will find you. A or EF. Evelyn stared at the card, then the note, then back at the card. Her mind refused to process it. A black card with no limit. It had to be a joke, a cruel, twisted prank designed to give her a moment of hope before snatching it away. No one did this. This wasn't real life. But as she held the card, its weight felt undeniably real. It was cool and solid in her trembling hand, an object of impossible power, delivered to her door by a ghost in the middle of the night. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't an apology. It was, as he'd written, a proposition, a test. And Evelyn had the terrifying feeling that she was a mouse in a maze, and a very wealthy, very dangerous cat was watching her every move. The dawn broke gray and unforgiving, casting long shadows across Evelyn's cramped apartment. She hadn't slept. The black card and the note lay on her nightstand, and she had spent the hours staring at them, as if they might suddenly combust or reveal their trick. Her first thought was that it was a fake, a very elaborate, very cruel joke. Finch had struck her as the kind of man who would enjoy watching someone make a fool of themselves trying to use a bogus credit card. The humiliation would be the punchline. Her second thought was that it was a trap. Maybe using the card would somehow indebt her to him in a way she couldn't escape. It could be legally rigged, a financial snare from which she would never extricate herself. But then her eyes drifted to the past due notice on the coffee table. She thought of Maya's labored breathing on bad days, the quiet panic in her sister's eyes when she felt an attack coming on, the medication that helped her cost nearly $400 a month, and the specialist visits were another mountain to climb. Stupidity or courage? Finch's words echoed in her mind. Right now, all she felt was desperation. She made a decision. She would try it once. Just once. Not on something extravagant, but on the one thing that mattered most. If it was a prank, the embarrassment would be contained to a single pharmacy. If it was real, well, she couldn't let herself think about that yet. She waited until Maya had left for school, her younger sister oblivious to the seismic event that had rocked their world overnight. Then Evelyn tucked the black card into the pocket of her worn jacket, its sleek form feeling like a dangerous secret against her hip. The pharmacy was a generic chain store, brightly lit and smelling of antiseptic. Evelyn walked to the prescription counter, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She handed the pharmacist, a tired-looking woman named Brenda, the refill slip for Maya's inhalers. That will be $389.54, Brenda said without looking up, her fingers flying across the keyboard. This was it. Evelyn's hand was slick with sweat as she pulled the black card from her pocket. It looked absurd in this mundane setting, like a panther in a petting zoo. She slid it into the chip reader, her eyes fixed on the tiny screen. Brenda glanced at the card, did a double take, and then looked up at Evelyn, her brow furrowed. This is a Centurion card, isn't it? Haven't seen one of these in person before. Evelyn just nodded, her throat too dry to speak. The machine whirred. The screen flashed. Processing. Evelyn held her breath. This was the moment of soul-crushing humiliation or unbelievable relief. The seconds stretched into an eternity. She could feel Brenda's curious stare. She imagined alarms going off, a manager being called, the words declined flashing in big red letters, and then a soft beep. The screen flashed green. Approved. Remove card. Evelyn felt the world tilt on its axis. A wave of lightheadedness washed over her. It was real. The card was real. The money was real. Brenda printed the receipt and handed it over with the bag of medication. Her professional demeanor had cracked. She was looking at Evelyn with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Have a nice day, ma'am. Ma'am. No one had ever called her that before. Evelyn walked out of the pharmacy in a daze. The crisp autumn air felt different. The city sounded sharper. In her hand was the small paper bag containing her sister's health, and in her pocket was a piece of plastic that held in theory infinite possibility. She sat on a park bench, her mind reeling. The power she now held was terrifying. Finch's words came back to her. I want to see what a person does when given the world. He was watching. She knew it. This wasn't a blind gift. Every transaction, every purchase would be a data point in his twisted experiment. What did he expect? For her to go on a wild shopping spree? Buy designer clothes, sports cars, a penthouse? The thought was intoxicating, a seductive whisper in the back of her mind. For a fleeting moment, she imagined walking into a high-end art supply store and buying every canvas, every tube of oil paint she had ever dreamed of. She imagined buying a small, warm house where Maya wouldn't have to climb 3 flights of stairs. But the thought was quickly soured by the image of Adrian Finch's cold, calculating eyes. He had given her this power, but it was his power. She was merely borrowing it. Using it for selfish reasons felt like surrendering to him, like becoming a character in his cynical play. It felt like a betrayal of the very principle that had led her here. She had stood up to him not for personal gain, but because it was the right thing to do. She looked at the bag from the pharmacy. That purchase felt different. It wasn't for her. It was for Maya. It was a necessity, not a luxury. It was a responsible, justifiable act. An idea began to form in her mind, a quiet rebellion. He wanted to see what she would do? Fine. She wouldn't play the part of the giddy lottery winner. She wouldn't become the cliché he was so clearly expecting. Her second stop was a Western Union. The clerk looked at the black card with even more suspicion than the pharmacist, making a phone call to verify it. The verification was swift and absolute. 5 minutes later, Evelyn walked out, having sent $10,000 to an address in a small town in Colombia. The recipient was Santiago's wife. She had gotten his details from a co-worker before she'd left the restaurant, under the guise of wanting to send a sympathy card. It was enough to cover the value of that plate 100 times over. It was enough to give a good man and his family security after a rich man's tantrum had cost him his job. That felt right. It felt like her. Her phone, a cheap prepaid model with a cracked screen, buzzed in her pocket. It was a number she didn't recognize. No caller ID, just a string of zeros. She hesitated, then answered. The pharmacy was predictable. A familiar, icy voice said. There were no greetings. A noble, if unimaginative, first move. It was Adrian Finch. The wire transfer, however, he continued, and she could almost hear the slight, grudging curl of his lip, was more interesting. Atoning for the old man's sins with my money. A bold choice. It wasn't your money that cost him his job, Evelyn said, her voice shaking slightly. It was your ego. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You have a sharp tongue, Miss Vance. I recommend you learn when to sheath it. Your experiment has entered its next phase. Be ready. I have tickets for you for the Children's Hospital Foundation Gala. It's tomorrow night. Black tie. The tickets will be delivered. Don't embarrass me. A gala? Evelyn scoffed, bewildered. I'm not going to a party with you. It's not a request, and you won't be going with me. You will be attending as my guest, but you will arrive alone. I want to see how you navigate a room full of sharks when you suddenly have the sharpest teeth. Use the card. Buy yourself something appropriate. Before she could protest, the line went dead. Evelyn stared at her phone, her mind racing. A gala. A room full of people like him. It was the last place on earth she wanted to be. He wasn't just testing her purchasing habits. He was testing her resolve. He was going to drop her into the deep end of his world and see if she would sink or swim. The next 24 hours were a surreal blur. A courier delivered a thick, cream-colored envelope containing a single ticket to the gala. The listed price for a single seat was $25,000. Evelyn felt sick looking at it. That amount could cover Maya's medical expenses for years. Finch's command to buy something appropriate was a challenge she couldn't ignore. Arriving in her usual attire would be a forfeiture, an admission that she didn't belong. But the idea of spending thousands of dollars on a dress felt like a profound betrayal of her own values. It was Maya who unknowingly solved the dilemma. You've been so stressed, Ellie, she said that evening, noticing her sister's distraction. Remember what you used to say? That creating art is like breathing for you. You haven't picked up a brush in months." Her sister's words sparked an idea, a way to play Finch's game by her own rules. Instead of going to a high-fashion boutique on Rodeo Drive, Evelyn went to the city's garment district. She used the card to buy several bolts of the most exquisite midnight blue silk, thread, and a vintage hand-crank sewing machine. She then went to an art supply store and, with a thrill that was almost painful, bought professional-grade fabric paints and fine-tipped brushes. For the rest of the day and deep into the night, she worked. Her small apartment transformed into a makeshift studio. The stress and fear melted away, replaced by the familiar, focused calm of creation. She wasn't just making a dress, she was forging armor. She designed a simple, elegant silhouette, but the beauty was in the details. With delicate, precise strokes, she hand-painted a subtle, shimmering constellation of stars along the hem and up one side of the bodice, mimicking the night sky. It was her art, her soul, woven into the fabric. The total cost was a fraction of what a designer gown would have been, but its value to her was immeasurable. The next evening, as she got ready, she felt a strange mix of terror and resolve. The dress fit perfectly, the painted stars catching the light with every movement. She styled her own hair and makeup, a minimalist approach that felt authentic to her. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a waitress playing dress-up. She saw an artist. She saw herself. A black town car, the same kind the messenger had used, arrived for her precisely at 7. The ride to the hotel ballroom was silent and nerve-wracking. She walked into the gala, and the assault on her senses was immediate. The cavernous room dripped with crystal chandeliers. The air hummed with the polite murmur of 100 conversations, and the scent of expensive perfume and blooming orchids was overwhelming. Men in immaculate tuxedos and women in glittering gowns that cost more than her college tuition mingled, their laughter like the clinking of ice in crystal glasses. She felt 1,000 eyes on her. They were the discreet, appraising glances of the wealthy, able to calculate a person's net worth in a single sweep. Her dress, devoid of any recognizable designer label, earned her a few puzzled, dismissive looks. She was an anomaly, an unsolved equation. She got a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter and found a relatively quiet corner, her mission to simply observe and survive. "I don't believe we've been introduced." A man had approached her, his smile slick and practiced. He was handsome, in his early 40s, with silvering temples and an air of predatory confidence. "I'm Joel Croft," he said, extending a hand, "Adrian's business partner, and you must be the famous Miss Vance." Evelyn's guard went up instantly. "Famous? Oh, Adrian has been uncharacteristically vocal," Joel said with a conspiratorial wink. "He described you as a fascinating social experiment. It's all anyone in our circle has been talking about, the waitress who tamed the beast for a moment anyway. So, tell me, how does it feel to hold the keys to the kingdom?" His eyes flickered down to her dress, a hint of a smirk on his lips. "I see you haven't gone on the expected shopping spree. How very principled of you." The condescension was palpable. "I'm not an experiment, Mr. Croft, and I prefer to make my own clothes." Joel's smirk widened. "An artist, of course. Adrian always had a type." The last part was said with a strange, almost bitter emphasis. Before she could ask what he meant, another voice, sharp and laced with venom, cut in. "Joel, are you boring this poor girl to death with your corporate war stories?" A young woman, no older than Evelyn herself, had joined them. She was stunningly beautiful, dressed in a blood-red gown, with fiery hair and eyes that held a cynical, world-weary expression. "Cindy, darling," Joel said, his tone shifting, "always a pleasure." "Evelyn Vance, this is Adrian's daughter, Cindy Finch." Cindy's eyes raked over Evelyn, her expression a mixture of contempt and curiosity. "So you're the one," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "My father's latest charity case. Let me guess. He paid off your student loans, bought you a new car, and now you're here to gaze at him adoringly and make him feel like a benevolent king." Evelyn was taken aback by the raw hostility. "I'm nobody's charity case." "Oh, please," Cindy scoffed, taking a sip of her champagne. "My father doesn't do anything without a motive. He collects people like he collects companies, as assets or liabilities. Since you're not a CEO, I'm guessing you're the former. A pretty little thing to distract him, to make him feel human for a few weeks before he gets bored and moves on. My mother was an artist too. He has a pattern. The mention of her mother, combined with Joel's earlier comment, struck a chord. There was a story here, a deep and painful one that Evelyn had just stumbled into. "I'm sorry about your mother," Evelyn said softly, the only genuine thing she could think to say. Cindy's harsh facade cracked for a fraction of a second, revealing a flicker of raw pain before it was sealed up again. "Don't be. You didn't know her, and you don't know my father." She gave Evelyn one last dismissive look. "Just a piece of friendly advice, and get what you can while you can. Because the second you stop being fascinating, the black card gets cut off, and you'll be back to serving canapes. He always gets bored." With that, Cindy turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Evelyn standing with Joel, who was watching the exchange with undisguised amusement. "Don't mind her," Joel said smoothly. "She has complicated feelings about her father, especially since her mother Alice passed away." Alice, the name of Adrian's late wife, the woman who had commissioned the plate. Just then, Evelyn saw him. Adrian Finch was standing across the room watching them. He wasn't speaking to anyone. He was just observing, his face an unreadable mask, his eyes locked on her. He had thrown her into the shark tank, and now he was watching from the safety of the cage, analyzing her every reaction. The cold, calculating nature of it all chilled her to the bone. She met his gaze across the glittering, crowded room. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. She simply held his stare, her chin held high, the hand-painted stars on her dress feeling like a shield. The message was clear. "I am not your experiment. I am not your asset, and I will not break." A flicker of something, surprise, respect, passed through his eyes before he turned away, leaving Evelyn to wonder what kind of dangerous, tangled web she had just been pulled into. The gala was a turning point. Evelyn realized she couldn't afford to be a passive player in Adrian Finch's game. To understand the man, to survive his world, she had to understand the ghost that haunted it, his late wife Alice. The hostility from his daughter, Cindy, and the cryptic remarks from his partner Joel all revolved around her. The shattered plate wasn't just about a broken object. It was a symbol of a shattered past. Armed with the limitless resources of the black card, Evelyn began to dig. She didn't hire a private investigator. That felt like a violation and would undoubtedly alert Finch. Instead, she used a more personal, intuitive approach. Her first step was a deep dive into online archives, society pages, art reviews, business journals from a decade ago. The picture that emerged was of a different Adrian Finch. Younger, yes, but also lighter. In photos with Alice, he was smiling. It was a genuine, unguarded smile that was utterly alien to the man she knew. Alice Finch, née Dubois, was a celebrated ceramic artist and sculptor. Her work was described as breathing life into clay, infusing earthly materials with ethereal grace. She was the daughter of a famed Parisian chef, Chef Dubois. Evelyn's blood ran cold. The Chef Dubois, her former boss at Aurelia, the connection was too direct to be a coincidence. Alice was the vibrant, creative soul, and Adrian was the brilliant, driven industrialist. They were a celebrated power couple. Then 10 years ago, the articles abruptly stopped. A few brief, sterile notices announced her death at 35. A tragic accident, they all said, with no further details. After that, the photos of Adrian changed. The smiles vanished, replaced by the grim, severe mask he wore today. His business dealings became more ruthless, his acquisitions more aggressive. He was a man at war with the world. Evelyn's next stop was a small, independent art gallery in a quieter part of the city. The gallery, Earth and Forms, had hosted Alice's first solo exhibition. The owner, a woman in her late 60s named Genevieve, had kind eyes and hands smudged with what looked like dried clay. When Evelyn mentioned Alice Finch, Genevieve's expression softened with a sad nostalgia. "Oh, Ellie," she said, her voice wistful. "The world lost a true light when she died. She was magic. She saw beauty everywhere, in everything. She used to say that Adrian was like a block of granite, strong, unyielding, but with a vein of pure gold running through him that only she could see. Evelyn, using the pretense of being an art student researching Alice's work, spent over an hour talking to Genevieve. She bought a small, elegant vase made by one of Alice's protégés, the transaction on the black card raising the gallery owner's eyebrows, but earning her trust. He was never the same after the accident, Genevieve said, carefully wrapping the vase. He shut everyone out, even her own father. Did you know her father, Antoine Dubois, is one of the world's finest chefs? Alice got her artistry from him. After she died, Adrian and Antoine had a terrible falling out. Adrian blamed him, I think. It was all so tragic. Antoine Dubois. The pieces clicked into place. Chef Dubois at Aurelia wasn't just a random chef. Adrian frequented that restaurant, a place run by his estranged, grieving father-in-law. Was it a form of penance or a form of punishment? What was the accident? Evelyn asked gently. Genevieve sighed, her gaze distant. They were driving back from their cabin upstate. A storm, a slippery road. Adrian was driving. The car went off an embankment. He walked away with a few broken ribs. Alice, she wasn't so lucky. I think the guilt of surviving, of being the one behind the wheel, just ate him alive. He encased himself in work and anger, and I don't think he ever truly came out. The story cast a chilling new light on everything. Adrian's rage, his control, his self-imposed isolation. It was all a fortress built around a core of unimaginable guilt and grief. The plate, designed by Alice and broken by accident, was a visceral reminder of the woman he had lost in an accident he believed was his fault. Evelyn's final stop was the public library's microfiche archives. After hours of scrolling through old newspapers, she found it. A small article from a local upstate paper, dated 10 years ago. It detailed the car crash on a winding mountain road. It mentioned the driver, Adrian Finch, and the passenger, Alice Finch. But it also mentioned a third detail, one that had been omitted from all the polished city papers. The police report noted that first responders had found a half-finished ceramic sculpture in the back seat, miraculously intact. It was a piece Alice had been working on at their cabin. Driven by a hunch, Evelyn used the card to book a car and drive upstate the next day. She found the small town mentioned in the article and, after some discreet inquiries, located the old police chief who had been at the scene. He was retired now, a grandfatherly man who ran a bait-and-tackle shop. He remembered the crash. Yeah, a bad one, he said, recalling the mangled luxury car. The man was beside himself, completely inconsolable. Wouldn't let us touch her, kept screaming her name. The strangest thing, though, was the sculpture in the back. He was obsessed with it, insisted we retrieve it before we even towed the car. Said it was the last thing she ever made. Do you know what happened to it? Evelyn asked, her heart pounding. The old chief nodded. He has it. I heard he built a special room for it in his city penthouse, a memorial of sorts. Evelyn drove back to the city, the pieces of the puzzle swirling in her mind. Adrian wasn't just grieving. He was trapped. He was living in a mausoleum of his own making, surrounded by ghosts and relics of a life he felt he had destroyed. His cruelty wasn't a sign of strength, but of profound internal brokenness. He punished the world because he couldn't stop punishing himself. That night she sat in her small apartment, the hand-painted dress she'd worn to the gala hanging on her door. She finally understood. The black card wasn't just about testing her morals or her ambition. It was a cry for help. He had seen in her defiance, in her willingness to stand up for a stranger, a strength that he had lost. He wasn't testing her. He was hoping she could somehow pass the test for him. He had given her a key to his kingdom of wealth, but what he really wanted was for someone to find the key to his prison of grief. And Evelyn, the struggling art student, the waitress, was beginning to think she knew where to find it. Knowing Adrian's secret was one thing. Knowing what to do with it was another. A direct attack would only make him retreat further into his fortress of anger. Evelyn knew she had to create a scenario he couldn't control, a moment of truth he couldn't escape through wealth or intimidation. Her plan was audacious, a high-stakes gamble using his own resources against his carefully constructed defenses. First, she met with Chef Antoine Dubois. In a quiet cafe, The proud chef's composure crumbled as Evelyn gently explained what she had learned. He confessed the source of the decade-long rift. Adrian blamed him for the fatal car ride. An argument over the impending storm had delayed their departure, and Adrian, twisted by grief, clung to the belief that without that argument, Alice would still be alive. The confession was a torrent of sorrow, revealing a wound that had never been allowed to heal. Her next moves were swift and decisive. Posing as a representative for an anonymous benefactor, she used the black card to lease a recently closed art gallery in the city's most prestigious arts district. The space was perfect, vast, white, and bathed in natural light from a massive skylight. She then sent two simple cryptic messages. One went to Cindy Finch. "If you want to understand your mother, meet me at this address tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone." The other went to Adrian, an urgent, non-negotiable summons. The following day, Evelyn stood inside the empty gallery. In the center of the room sat a single object, shrouded in a white cloth. Cindy arrived first, her expression a mask of wary hostility. "What is this? Another one of your games?" she demanded. "This isn't a game," Evelyn said calmly. "This is about your family." A few minutes later, Chef Dubois walked in. Cindy's face went pale. "Grandpère," she whispered. They hadn't spoken in years, another casualty of Adrian's isolating grief. The last to arrive was Adrian. He strode in, his eyes blazing with fury as he saw his daughter and father-in-law. "What is the meaning of this?" he snarled, his gaze locking onto Evelyn. "Ambushes are not part of our arrangement." "This isn't an ambush," Evelyn said, her voice echoing in the vast empty space. "It's an intervention. For 10 years you have all been grieving in separate prisons. I think it's time you were paroled." With a dramatic flourish, she walked to the center of the room and pulled the cloth off the object. It was a potter's wheel. Next to it, on a small table, were several large blocks of wet clay. Adrian stared at it, his composure finally cracking. A flicker of confusion, then raw pain, crossed his face. Evelyn turned to him, her voice resonating with a passion that commanded his attention. "I know about the accident, Adrian. I know you were driving, and I know that for 10 years you have been punishing yourself for surviving while punishing everyone else for reminding you of what you lost." She then turned to Antoine. "And you've let him, punishing yourself for an argument that couldn't have changed a thing." Finally, she looked at Cindy. "And you've been hating your father because it's easier than facing the fact that you lost them both on that road." The silence in the room was deafening, thick with a decade of unspoken words. "Alice was an artist," Evelyn continued, her voice softening. "Her gift was to take formless, broken earth and create something beautiful and whole. She built things, and all of you in her name have only been breaking things ever since. You broke your family, you broke your hearts, and you," she said, looking directly at Adrian, "you were ready to break an old man's life over a broken plate because you can't fix what's broken inside of you." She gestured to the clay in the wheel. "She would have sat you all down and made you create something together. She would have forced you to get your hands dirty, to build something new out of the mess." Evelyn walked over to Adrian. For the first time, he didn't look intimidating. He looked utterly exposed, his armor stripped away. "You gave me this card to see what I would do with it," she said, pulling the sleek black card from her pocket. "So I'm using it to give you all a chance to start over. I've leased this gallery for 1 year. I'm calling it the Alice Dubois Finch Foundation. Its mission will be to provide studio space and scholarships to struggling young artists, the kind of people Alice championed." She held the card out to him. "But it only works if its namesake's family is a part of it, if you build it together." Adrian looked from the card to his daughter's tear-streaked face, to the weary, hopeful eyes of his father-in-law. Slowly, shakily, Antoine Dubois walked towards his granddaughter and wrapped her in an embrace. Cindy collapsed into his arms, a decade of resentment dissolving into sobs. "Why?" Adrian whispered, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on Evelyn. "Why would you do all this?" "Because you were yelling at the wrong person," Evelyn said simply. "You weren't mad at Santiago. You were mad at yourself, and everyone deserves a chance to stop yelling." She placed the black card on the table next to the clay. Her part in his experiment was over. She had taken his test and rewritten all the rules. Now it was up to them. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the gallery, leaving the fractured family alone with the silence, the clay, and the ghost of a woman who had, through a stranger's courage, given them one last chance to be whole again. Evelyn walked away from the gallery with a profound sense of peace. She had no job and a future just as uncertain as before, but she felt free, not destitute. The black card was gone, and she was once again just Evelyn Vance, art student and sister. She braced herself for the inevitable return to reality and began her job search anew, sending resumes to every restaurant in the city. For 3 days, there was only silence. Then a thick, cream-colored parcel from a prestigious law firm arrived. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, she found official notice that a full scholarship, covering all tuition and art supplies for the remainder of her degree, had been established in her name, funded by an anonymous donor. Beneath it was a check made out to her for $75,000. The memo line contained just 2 words: severance pay. Tucked inside was a final, smaller envelope with a handwritten note. Evelyn, you were right. I was yelling at the wrong person. The foundation is moving forward. Cindy and her grandfather are already arguing over the charter. It is a start. I have also been informed that Aurelia has a new dishwasher, Santiago, at a salary he named. Chef Dubois was surprisingly insistent. The enclosed is restitution for a job you lost because of my actions. The scholarship is an investment. The world needs more artists with your vision. This is not the end of our arrangement, but the beginning of a new one, should you accept. The Alice Dubois Finch Foundation needs a director, someone with integrity and a deep understanding of its mission. The position is yours. There is no black card attached, only a salary, a purpose, and a great deal of work. Let me know. Adrian. Evelyn read the note 3 times, the words blurring through her tears. It wasn't the money or the job offer. It was the change in his words, in his signature, from the imperious AF to the human Adrian. The cold puppeteer was gone, replaced by a man taking his first steps out of the darkness. Instead of calling, she went to the gallery the next morning. The doors were unlocked. Inside, the space was already being transformed. Blueprints were laid out on a table, and Cindy and Chef Dubois were having a spirited argument in a mix of English and French about the placement of the kilns. Standing by the window, watching them with a small, weary smile on his face, was Adrian. He was in a simple sweater, not a power suit, and the deep lines of anger around his eyes seemed to have softened. He saw her and walked over. Evelyn, he said, the name sounding natural. Adrian, she replied. I assume since you're here, he began. I accept the job, she said, on one condition. He raised an eyebrow. And that is that we do this right, she said, gesturing around the buzzing room. This can't just be about writing checks. It has to be about community, about giving people a chance to create, to heal. The way Alice would have wanted. A genuine, unguarded smile touched Adrian Finch's lips. It was the same smile she had seen in the old photographs, a smile that chased away the shadows of a decade. I wouldn't have it any other way, Director Vance, he said. The black card was gone, its purpose served. It had been a test, but not just for her. It was a desperate, chaotic plea from a man who had forgotten how to connect with the world. In the end, Evelyn hadn't just stood up to a billionaire. She had reminded a broken family that the most valuable things, courage, empathy, art, and love, could never be bought, only rebuilt, piece by painful piece. As she stood there on the verge of a new life she had forged herself, she knew this was a foundation she could truly build on. Evelyn's story started with an act of defiance over a broken plate, but it became a story about how to mend a broken life. It reminds us that behind every powerful, intimidating facade, there can be a story of pain and grief. It shows us that true wealth isn't found in a limitless bank account, but in the courage to do what's right, the empathy to see another suffering, and the strength to help them heal. Sometimes the biggest changes in the world don't come from a grand gesture, but from a quiet, unwavering refusal to let a good person be trampled. What did you think of Evelyn's choices? Would you have used the black card differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up, Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and move you. Thank you for listening.